So that goes sometimes. So, I thought we would start off by just having some opportunity for you all to ask me any questions about your semester by semester guides. You should have started working on those at this point. You might have run into some questions, so I'll be happy to answer anything there, or to answer any questions that you may have regarding the activities assignment. So, open the floor up to questions. Any questions?
What do we do Friday?
Speak up, please.
What do we do Friday?
What will be due Friday?
Good semester by semester good.
Is it due this Friday? I don't, yeah,
Yeah, it's due Friday at 5.
I can't remember the due date, but
If you were a transfer student, is that involved with the dual enrollment, or do you just do it like you?
transfer credit is different than dual enrollment. So dual enrollment was stuff you did while you were in high school. And if you want to, you would list that on that first page. But your transfer credit would be if you started off at a community college, and you would list that entire semester out. Now you can, so any of the dual enrollment stuff needs to be taken care of on that first page. Transfer credit needs to be in a semester when you took that transfer credit. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
In regard to that question, so technically I did a dual enrollment program, but instead of going to high school for my 2 years, I did the community college level. Would that count as dual enrollment, or do I need to put?
Did you also get high school credit for it?
Yes.
Then I would count it as dual enrollment.
Yeah, that's like 70 credits.
70?
Yeah, I got my associate's degree while I was in high school.
Okay.
How I did it is, since I'm a transfer as well, so I did on the front page, I did all my dual enrollment credits, and then since I came from South, I did my credits there, and then now I'm working on the credits here and in the future. But
So,
yeah, my front page is pretty lengthy.
and still on one page? Needs to be on one page.
Okay.
So if you need to change the font size a little bit, that's okay.
I probably have.
Mine's on like in font size like 8. I had to fit everything on there.
So if you want to, since you all have so many dual enrollment credits, you all can list them out on the semester by semester if you want to do it that way and make it cleaner. Just in the dual enrollment section, just mention semesters X, Y, and Z were dual enrollment while I did high school and got an associate's degree at this. However you want to word it, but just make that clear. That'll work. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
And we don't have the summer section, do we just not type that?
You just, if you are not doing anything in the summer, you just leave it alone. Yep. I made the summer a little different because I wanted you all to be aware. Anything that you're planning on in the summer, you need to talk with your advisor about to make sure that that's going to, technically everything will transfer in if it's from an accredited institution, but that doesn't guarantee its applicability. So you want to work with your advisor on any summer things that you're doing. So have you all yet received an email from your advisor about your upcoming advising session? Has that come out yet? Okay. So I really do want you to take this document that you've developed. I'll give you a little bit of feedback on it when I look at it and grade it. But again, really, I'm looking at how neat it is. Did you completely list all of the requirements? Did you follow the rules, kind of thing, as we discussed before? But you're going to really want to go back with your advisor and sit down with them with that document and say, this is what I've come up with. Now let's talk about what you think the best because you may pick some courses that we actually call toxic combinations. It's really not a good idea to take sometimes 2 or 3 classes together because of just the workload that's involved with them. It may seem like, oh, that's just 3 classes, but they're 3 classes that are, require a little more work than you might expect. And one perfect example is history. History requires an awful lot of writing, more so than many other GEC classes. And so if you're putting that at the same time you're taking your writing intensive class with its PChem, and that can be a lot of work for a student. And so it's not to say that you can't handle it. Some students can, some students can't. But that's a conversation that you'll want to have with your advisor. That's the whole point of it. So you have a good document to sit there with them. Any other questions about either that or the activities participation assignment? Has everybody gotten an activity lined up so far for the first one? Yeah, okay, good. That's good. All right. So today we're going to talk about a few things. Today might be a little shorter than usual, depends on how many questions we all get. But I found this interesting in one of the more recent issues of C&E News, where they were talking with Paul Enestus, I guess that's how he pronounces his last name, who is a green chemistry professor. Currently he's at Yale, started off in government, I believe, right, as the Environmental Protection Agency, now is at Yale. What is green chemistry?
I'd assume eco-friendly, or at least as close as you can get to it.
Yeah, it's this idea of trying to have a minimal impact on the environment in terms of what we do from a chemistry standpoint. You know, a lot of problems that you all hear about in, you know, the environment, ecology, etc., some people will say chemists cause those issues. There's some truth to that. But there's also some truth to the fact that we have the ability to study those issues and help solve them. What might be something that you would consider a green chemistry? Yeah.
Maybe like the disposal of like toxic chemicals and stuff.
Okay, so how we dispose of things certainly is going to impact how, you know, we are impacting the environment, right? Certainly going to have an impact there. So if we can minimize our use of things and be more efficient with them, that's certainly going to lead to some green chemistry, right? A perfect example is here in academia. When I was in your boat 30 years ago taking organic chemistry class, we actually did reactions on very large scales. You know, we had 500, 1,000 milliliter flasks doing reactions, making multi-grams of products that ultimately, because they weren't that interesting for research, they were, you know, just teaching us techniques and how to really do things, ended up being disposed of. When you all go into organic chemistry, anybody in organic chemistry right now? Okay, do you do anything with that big of a flask? You haven't yet, right?
Currently we have it.
You haven't, and you're not going to in that class. You use micro scale kits, and so you're doing things on much less than a gram for the most part, okay? And so you're going to generate much less waste. Scale, how big we do things, when really all we're trying to do is teach you a technique. We don't need to teach you how to do it on a gram, on you know, 25, 30 grams of material. We can teach you on 500 milligrams or something like that. We can teach you much more efficiently to do that. So we're trying to be more eco-friendly in how we teach students about chemistry. What else might lead to green chemistry? Yeah.
Disposing greenhouse gas, or finding a way to get rid of greenhouse gases.
Okay, ways in which we can minimize our generation of greenhouse gases, or what about in this particular article? What did they do with one of the greenhouse gases? Vodka. Yeah, how do you make vodka out of carbon dioxide, right? That was kind of an interesting take. People like their vodka. But how could we, instead of growing corn or some other, vodka's not corn, but how can we, you know, grow crops? I mean, let me say this differently. Why grow crops that we can use to feed people to make vodka when we could just take carbon dioxide out of the air and make the same thing, right? That's one way. So however we can use carbon dioxide as a building block to things that we use, that could be a green chemistry process. In fact, my wife, when she was in graduate school, her mentor and she was working on how you can catalytically activate carbon dioxide and convert it into other molecules. Turns out it's quite a challenge. Carbon dioxide is very stable. It's not terribly reactive, right? Think about it. You use carbon dioxide in fire extinguishers to put out fires because it doesn't burn. It doesn't do a whole lot. So it's not an easy thing to think about. Of course, trees take carbon dioxide and make sugars. They do all kinds of things with carbon dioxide, but we're still learning about how we can, you know, take the carbon dioxide that I'm breathing out right now and convert it into something useful. What else might we do? Yeah.
I would say that more likely go for more biodegradable in a sense. That would be a more lean to, and at the very least go for more efficient uses and more efficient production. Just
Okay.
minimize.
Certainly that's going to have an environmental impact, right? It's going to, if we can use things that biodegrade into things that are safe. I can make all kinds of things that degrade, but they can sometimes degrade into things that are actually harmful. So, you know, you've got to want to degrade these into things that you can, you know, not really cause too much of an impact. In fact, a lot of things that degrade in landfills generate methane. Methane itself is a greenhouse gas. So the idea of burying our trash and forgetting about it, that's a myth. You can't just forget about it. And so there are places across the world that actually bury their trash and then harvest that methane to heat homes and do cooking and that kind of stuff. So, but we wouldn't call that green chemistry per se. That's kind of a recycling kind of thing. Really, the idea of green chemistry is not only to minimize the environmental impact, but also to maximize your efficiency in the use of atoms. There's a chemist, his name is Barry Trost. I think he's still at Stanford. He may have retired now. But he coined this term back in the 90s called atom economy. And so really what you want to do, if you're a company, you want to take all of the atoms of everything that you had to buy to make your product. You want those atoms to end up in your product. You want to have zero waste. And that was the goal, was to have reactions that create zero waste. And we do have some reactions that do that. And so that's actually a big step towards this idea of green chemistry. So for those of you who are interested in environmental policy, who are interested in the environment, who are interested in that in addition to chemistry, kind of being in the green chemistry field is something that might be of interest to you. We really don't have anybody here who studies quote unquote green chemistry. I might be one of the closest, given that I do reactions with enzymes to make products. I don't consider myself a biochemist. I just use the enzyme to do a lot of the complicated chemistry. And we do it in water as opposed to doing the chemistry in something that's toxic. So, although I would not consider myself a green chemistry pro, but we do that kind of work. What else was interesting about this particular individual other than the green chemistry perspective?
His business, the way he's participating in like the business world of chemistry.
That's right. Yeah, he's not like I am. I'm pretty much so just an academic, right? But he's also very entrepreneurial, isn't he? I mean, he's created several companies. Those companies have been spun off. He sits on the boards of companies, in addition to being a professor at Yale. So you can imagine he's a very busy individual, right? But one of the ideas that he proposes, right, is that faculty should be doing research and then spinning that off into something that's useful for society other than just publishing in journals, which is pretty much so what I do. It's not for everybody. I'm not that entrepreneurial, but some of you may be entrepreneurial. Some of you may be thinking about ways in which you can take your education and move it on and create a business at some point. If that's the case for you, I would highly recommend that you think about minoring in some sort of business or getting one of the certificates over in business. Because running a business, I can guarantee you, is very different than working for a business. You have a lot of different things to think about. And if you're in this type of world, you've got to know your science, but you also can't run your business into the ground, right? So, or it's not going to be successful. So you need to have a little bit in both worlds. And I found that very interesting. You won't find a whole lot of faculty who have a foot in both worlds. You'll find a few, but it is fairly rare in academia. And so I found that another interesting point. So good catch on that. All right. There we go. So today I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about how we learn. I am certainly not a cognitive scientist. I'm not 100% of an expert on this. But I have paid attention to what we call student success initiatives. I've paid attention to and taken a great interest recently in how students are successful. Back when I was in college, you went to college and your professors basically said sink or swim. I actually attended a class one time where the professor said, look to your left, look to your right, only one of you will be in this class by the end of the semester. That's not the attitude that we ever should have had. And certainly in academia, we're becoming more and more aware of our past sins, so to speak, which I would say is certainly one of them. You got into college, everybody who we accept into college, we need to make sure that we give you the tools that you need to be as successful as you want to be. Okay? As successful as you want to be. And so one of the things that I did several years ago was I read several books on the topic from experts and started to think about how we think and started to think about how we learn. And that's something that nobody ever teaches us, is it? I mean, you just go to class and we give you information and we expect you that you learn it somehow, right? How many of you have ever thought about how you learn? Yeah, I'm seeing some of this, maybe, right? It's called metacognition, thinking about how you think. And I know that sounds a little weird for most people because you think, well, I was born, I'm thinking now, I know how to think. But do you know how to think in a way that really contributes to solid learning? And so after reading several materials and attending numerous conferences and seminars, I came up with this presentation called Stop Studying and Start Learning, which derives itself from a number of areas. And I want to share that with you today. So I know you're probably a little confused right now for a professor to be standing up here and saying, I need you to stop studying. And the reason is because I want you to start learning. And what I'm saying by stop studying is at least as you probably practice it now. Okay, and so let's think about some words that come to mind when you think of the words study and learning. So if I tell you the word study, what comes to mind when you hear the word study? Memorization. Review.
Comprehension.
Comprehension.
Reading.
Maybe homework, right? What else?
Practice.
Maybe some practice, okay? Right, so these are some things that I found in the literature and things that I think of, right? And so I've heard reading, review, exercise, homework, memorizing. Many of you probably study by cramming before the exam. We all are guilty of that from time to time, right? Some people will think of going and doing research on something as studying, right? But a lot of that stuff that we do on the study side really doesn't lead to our comprehension or learning of the material. Now, if you hear the word learning, what do you think about? Understanding. What else?
Intrigued.
Pardon?
Intrigued.
Intrigue. Okay, I'll buy that. Curiosity, maybe, right? What else?
Research.
Research certainly would probably be on that area as well. Anything else? These are some things that I came up with. You might think of training. You might think of wisdom. You might think of, again, I heard research, right? Attainment, permanent, right? If I study something, I might know it in that moment, but if I've learned it, I retain it and I keep it kind of permanently and forever, right? I'm able to use it over and over again. Understanding, transferability. What do I mean by transferability?
It's usable, or it's like something that you can
Okay, yeah,
to teach somebody else.
okay,
You can apply the knowledge that you learn.
okay. All of those things are correct. There really is no wrong answer there that I heard. But when I think about transferability, I think about if I've learned something within a particular class, I can then use it in subsequent classes or outside the classroom environment in a way that's beneficial, okay? And as you all are putting together your semester by semester guides, you're starting to see how our curriculum is connected. In chemistry, it's not just take these two courses and then pick a series of electives, right? It's you take this course, then you take that course, then you take that course. It's built on a very structured hierarchy because we expect you to be able to transfer what you learn in Gen Chem to organic and from organic to the other courses that's building upon. Analytical, PChem, et cetera, et cetera. We expect that all to culminate to Chemistry 496, which is your capstone course where you'll do research. We expect you to be able to take your chemistry knowledge that you've learned in each one of these bricks that we call classes and assemble them into some kind of structure that you were going to call your senior thesis or your senior document, whatever you want to call it. If you're in the honors college, you're going to write a thesis. If you're not in the honors college, you're going to write a final report on your capstone research, which is about more or less the same length as a thesis. So these are the differences between study and learning, right? And so if you think about, if you've ever been trained for a job, right? If you've ever worked a job and you got trained on something, did they train you and just expect you to know it for that moment? No, they expect you to be able to apply it all the time, right? And so what we want you to do is we want you to get out of study mode. I want you to get into learning mode. Okay, now there is studying that you have to do to learn. There's no doubt about that. But I want you to transfer your mindset from I'm going to study this stuff to I'm really going to try and learn this stuff. Okay? You will never be able to keep all your facts and figures in your head. Some of you might, but most of you won't for the rest of your life. Okay? And so learning really is those connections that are made in the brain that remain for a long time after you forget a lot of what you have studied. As you are studying and learning, your mind is making connections, and you'll forget facts. But those connections will remain, and when you get those facts again, you'll be able to apply them again. And that's what we really want you to be able to do. So how do you keep yourself in learning mode? That's very, very important. Okay? And they're not the same. Okay? So let me give you an example here. And this comes back to what you just said just a moment ago about teaching. Okay? Suppose that I asked one of you to next week to teach this class on a specific topic. So if I said to you, you're going to come in here and you're going to teach a topic to this class, are you going to go and study that topic, or are you going to go and learn about that topic? You're going to learn it. And why are you going to do that? What emotions come to your mind when you heard me say I might have you come and teach a class next week? Stress. What else? Maybe a little fear, right? It's not easy standing up in front of people and talking to them about something, especially if you're worried about do you really know it. I can get up here and talk very comfortably in front of chemistry students because I know chemistry. Could I stand up in front of a group of English students and talk about English literature? I would be scared to death. Now, I've had 2 courses in English literature when I was an undergraduate. I've had all that type of work, right? I read, but I'm not a scholar in that area. I don't know that kind of information in my bones, so to speak, right? But I know chemistry, and I'm confident in my chemistry, right? So what I would do, if I was in your shoes, and let's say I was in an English class and the instructor said, you got to talk about Chaucer next week, I would first have a panic attack, and then I would decide I'm going to learn as much as I can learn about Chaucer before I get into that class next week. I wouldn't be saying, how do I study Chaucer, right? I wouldn't be going, well, I'm going to memorize a few facts and figures. I'm going to want to learn it so that I can stand up here and comfortably deliver the material, right? So we're definitely going to put ourselves in learning mode if we have to get up in front of somebody and teach it, right? And so there's this Latin term, docendo discimus. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. And it means by teaching we learn. This is absolutely true, okay? If I have to stand in front of a bunch of people and teach something, I'm going to learn it, okay? So what does this mean for you all? Am I going to have you come up here and teach a class next week? No. So why am I bothering talking about this?
Learning strategy.
It is a learning strategy. Teaching something is a learning strategy. Okay? So by teaching, we learn. And I'll tell you for this, I mean, I'm kind of telling my dirty secrets here, but I went through, got a chemistry degree. I went to University of Oklahoma, got my PhD, defended my dissertation. I went to Vanderbilt, did my postdoctoral work for 3 years. My 4th year at Vanderbilt, I got a job teaching, it was called Chemistry 101A and 101B, which was general chemistry for non-majors. And the first time that I went into the class, I realized how much that I just took for granted, but that I didn't really understand. And so I learned from that first teaching experience that I actually was learning an awful lot during that process as well. There were things that I just took for granted from my education, but I didn't really have a thorough understanding of each and every one of those topics. So I learned as well as the students did as we were going through it, because I knew I had to go teach this material. I actually started learning little details that I had forgotten from the past. So how can you all use this to improve your learning? What can you do? None of your teachers are going to ask you to come up and teach a class, but what can you do?
Try and explain it to like a friend.
Yeah, that's right. Try to translate it to something that maybe one of your friends who isn't a major can understand, right? That's one thing you can do. How might, so have you all had a Gen Chem exam yet? No, you haven't had one yet? What might you do to prepare for a Gen Chem exam that uses this? Might get a study group together, right? And sit and teach each other a little bit. Each of you take a topic and say, okay, I'm going to try to teach this to you. And as you're teaching it, you're helping those people who don't understand it quite as well as you do, but you're also reinforcing and learning as well. And it's a very true statement that by teaching we learn. And if you can teach it, you typically know the material very well. Okay? Now there are some people who can fake their teaching. There's no doubt about it. It happens all the time. Okay? But to truly understand something, I think one needs to be able to teach it and teach it in simple terms. We're going to talk about the Feynman technique as well today, which I want to share with you because it's an important technique that helps you learn and helps you prepare to be able to teach the material. Okay? So this was a little cartoon strip out of one of the pieces that I read for putting this together. And it says, you know, you can see the two little boys and a dog. One boy says, I taught Stripe how to whistle. The other boy says, I don't hear him whistling. And he said, I taught him. I didn't say he learned it. What I'm doing right now is teaching. When at the end of the hour, I'm done. But it doesn't, and I've done my job. And I hope I've done it well, right? But that doesn't mean that you've learned it, right? So learning actually is really a solo sport. My job is to help facilitate your learning. So I don't even like to use the word teacher anymore. I'm a learning facilitator, right? I'm here to help you all learn. Now, we're not talking about chemistry topics so much in this class, right? But I'm hoping that you get the skill sets and the techniques that you need to learn better in all of your classes, not just chemistry classes, by the way. Everything that we're talking about today can be applied to English, history, math, physics. Doesn't matter what topic it is, it can be learned using these types of techniques. In this same thing, this paper called Learning to Learn, this was published several years ago by Worth and Perkins, but there's this learning cycle called the Kolb's learning cycle. And these are the things that we actually embrace as we're learning, right? There's the concrete experience. What in chemistry is your concrete experience? You might be making some observations about the world, right? You know that the sky is blue when it's not cloudy. You know a variety of things, right? We have reflective observation, right? We have abstract conceptualism, how we think about things. We have active experimentation. Where do you do that in chemistry? The laboratory. Why is it that just about every one of your chemistry courses has a lecture component and a laboratory component? Is it, pardon?
To apply what you've learned.
To apply what you've learned, right? Now, a lot of people will frequently say, oh, so we can learn the skills. And that's partly true, right? But it's to reinforce what you're learning in the lecture, in addition to getting those skills. Why is that important? You think about chemistry, do you all see atoms react? No. Right? You don't really get to see that, especially when we're lecturing, right? Things can be very abstract, right? But we hope that when you go into the laboratory and start putting your hands on it, mixing things together, watching things change, analyzing it, interrogating the situation, right? That you're actually doing something through an active experiment, that really does reinforce your concrete experience, your reflective observation, and just your thinking about things, okay? So chemistry is actually very much so an active discipline, right? You're not going to just come in, take a bunch of lectures, get your degree, and move on. You're going to leave with skills, you're going to leave with knowledge, and you're going to leave with this ability to really understand because you experimented and grappled with it. These are the things that I call experiences for an academic. For those of you who are studying this field, think about this, making mistakes. How many people like to make mistakes? You like to make mistakes? Okay.
I'm very confident
You're very confident?
in making mistakes.
You're very confident in making mistakes. I like that. That's good. Making mistakes, failures. I mean, nobody really goes home and says, hey, I failed today, right? But these are experiences that lead to your learning. You can't learn without failure, right? We hope that you fail before you get to the exam, and you've learned from those failures so that you can perform well on the exam, right? That's why we have homework. That's why we have active learning sessions. That's why we have you do group work. That's why we have you go into the laboratory and talk with your colleagues and work in pairs to do things before you turn in that report, right? So that you can make those mistakes in a safer environment, right? Repeat performance, interactions with others, and personal reflection. These are all experiences that lead to your learning. Failure is an important part of learning. I don't want you to fear failure. Okay? I want you to fight it like the Dickens, right? I want you to, not accept it as the final thing, but I want you to embrace the failures and your mistakes as learning moments. You will, at some point, get an exam back or a quiz or something that did not meet your expectations. And you've got two choices. You can take a fixed mindset approach about it and you can give up. And I don't want any of you to do that. Or you can take an active mindset and you can learn from that, and you can move on, right? And that's what we want you to do, okay? So in many of your classes, you will also be given opportunities to correct your failures, and that gives you an opportunity to learn as well. What do I mean by repeat performance?
Do it again, do it again and again until like you finally got it down.
Yeah, and what do we typically just call that? What's another word for repeat performance? Practice, right? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice, right? How do you win a football game on Friday or Saturday? You practice, right? Whatever your thing is, it's practice. Chemistry requires practice. If you think that you can go into a lecture, hear what the professor has to say about it, do well on the tests, you're fooling yourself, okay? You might be able to get away with it in Gen Chem because Gen Chem is a lot of repeat of what you had in high school, so on and so forth. You might even be able to get away with it your first semester of organic. But after that, I guarantee you, if all you do is listen to what the professor has to say and think all you need to do is regurgitate it, it's not going to work for you, okay? You've got to practice. You've got to grapple with problems. That's why we give you homework. That's why we give you projects. That's why we do laboratories, all those kinds of things. It takes this effort of practice, okay? Interactions with others, what do we mean there? Networking. What else? That's a big umbrella. But what else might we consider networking? Study groups, right? It turns out that even people who are on an introverted scale, and I include myself in that, by the way, interactions with others reinforces our learning experiences. And again, because when we're interacting with one another, whether we really say, I'm trying to teach you or not, we are engaging in a teaching moment when we have a conversation about material. So when you all get together in study groups and work, you all are having these interactions with others, and that certainly helps the process. What makes a good study group? Let me rephrase that. What makes a bad study group?
Not communicating.
Not communicating certainly does. What's the point if you're not going to communicate, right? Distractions. Okay. What else?
Lack of information.
Lack of information. I like what I'm hearing. What else? This is what I always tell people about study groups. Form them, but form them carefully. Here's what typically happens, and I can say this because I used to teach organic chemistry. You know what typically happens with study groups? You get 3 or 4 people who are struggling in the class, and they get together and they start, in the lab or whatever, and they go, oh yeah, I'm struggling. And all those people who are struggling with the same thing get together and try to study. They're all in the same boat. You need people from multiple boats to come and help, right? You need people who are strong in this area but maybe weak in others, somebody that's strong in those areas that others are weak in, so that you can come in and feed off of each other. If you're all having and struggling on the same topic, you're probably not going to be able to work your way through it. Form good study groups. Study groups of people who are willing to share, willing to communicate. Sometimes I've seen study groups happen where there's one lead in the study group and everybody else is kind of being a leech. You don't want to be part of a study group like that. You all want to contribute, okay? You want to have good interactions with others. You want to have respect for one another, right? And all of that, and to have good interactions. So if you all can build on each other's strengths, that's going to be a very good study group, okay? And you got to know each other before you can even do that. So get to know people who are in your classes. Get to know people who are in your laboratories. All of those types of things, and build good study groups. You all, by and large, are going to take the same classes, whether you're chemistry or biochemistry, at least through analytical, right? And PChem, in your first PChem. So get to know one another and build those study groups early and get together often. At least once a week or so works pretty well. What do we mean by personal reflection? You just get an exam back, you thought you'd done really well, you thought you should have gotten 100, you find out you got a 75. What's personal reflection? Okay, see what you did wrong, right? What else? Does it just stop there?
Figure out ways you can improve.
Okay, try to find out ways in your study strategy that might have let you down. How can I improve on my study strategy? What else?
Which you can do better in the future.
Okay, so how would you, what do you mean by that?
Like, what did I do wrong this time and what can I change to do better?
Okay. You're going to know usually pretty right off the bat which problems you got wrong, right? So can we dig a little deeper into that? It's not enough just to know, oh, I got that problem wrong, right?
Group them into like topics.
Okay, so that's a good thing. You know, looking at an exam, is there a particular topic theme that I'm struggling with, right? That's a good start, reflecting on that. Hey, I did really, you know, maybe this exam had 3 topics. I did really well in 2, but not the third one, right? So apparently I'm doing okay in these first 2 topics, but this third topic I need to dive a little deeper, right? So it's not enough just to say I missed questions 2, 4, and 6, right? Were there any related themes in those questions? And can I go back and improve upon that, okay? So personal reflection is very, very important. Getting an exam back and simply going, well, I'll do better next time, isn't enough. You need to reflect on why you did what you did. Now, you also need to reflect if you did well. Okay, you need to think about how you did on that exam. Think about your study strategies, right? Even if you got 100, you need to go back through all of those problems on that exam and reflect on them. Could you have answered the question better, especially if it's a, you know, not a multiple choice type exam where you're actually having to write something. Is there something that you could have explained better? Always be in personal reflection mode because that is key to learning. Okay? Many of you have probably seen this pyramid before. This is called Bloom's taxonomy. Okay? It's the different layers of learning. Where do you want to be by the time you graduate from the University of Southern Mississippi with your degree? Where do you want to be on the pyramid? Okay, Southern Miss to the top, right? Do you think you're going to really be there with a bachelor's degree in chemistry? You're going to be absolutely at the top. That's why we have a graduate degree, all right? That's why, but many of you are not going to go on to graduate school. Some of you are going to go to medical school, pharmacy school, whatever the case may be. Some of you are going to get a job in chemistry. And what I would say is that we're doing really, really well if we can get an undergraduate student by the time they graduate with a degree in chemistry to the point where they can do some analysis, some good analysis of things. You know, that's what somebody would expect you to do if you wanted to get a job with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. They would expect you to come into the company and work and provide analysis of whatever processes that they're doing, right? That's what they would expect you to do. So this is kind of where a graduate or an undergraduate student we hope to get really good at by the time you graduate here. Where do you think you are now? Y'all think, you think you're at the bottom? I think you're probably a little better than
I
that.
think I'm between the bottom and understanding.
Yeah, I would say that you're probably somewhere in here. You know, you're all coming in with, you know, some high school prep and pretty, you know, you're beyond the remembering part, I hope. This layer of the pyramid is the least, in my opinion, is the least important today. I mean, yes, you have to remember some things, but, you know, we have access to so much information at our fingertips. You know, Star Trek came true. We have these little things called cell phone. We have access to vast amounts of information. I don't really need to remember the boiling point of some obscure solvent anymore. I can look that up, right? But I need to understand what that means, right? And so a lot of this, you're gonna remember things because, you know, you use it a lot. But if you forget a little bit of something, if you have the rest, you're gonna be able to find that piece of information and move forward, right? So I I'd put you probably somewhere in here. You're starting to learn how to understand things. But as you move up in our curriculum, we hope you start to be able to apply things. When you get into organic chemistry, how do you apply those concepts of general chemistry? How do you apply the concepts of general and organic when you're in PChem? We expect you to start being able to apply those things. And then by the time you graduate, again, with your capstone experience, we hope you can go into a laboratory, do some real experiments, provide independent analysis and information that will lead to good student outcomes for you. And then as you move on, whether it's in chemistry or some other field, we hope that you move up the pyramid finally to where you're getting to creative. And even Albert Einstein said, creativity is more important than knowledge. Being creative is how we create new things. I mean, there's no question about that, right? So let's talk a little bit about metacognition, okay? And so this came from the book Teaching Students How to Learn. It's a very good book if you ever want to read a little bit about this. It's one of those books you can read in 2 evenings pretty easily. But she talked about a variety of metacognitive strategies. She listed 10 of them. Interestingly enough, Dr. Yancey McGuire was a chemistry professor at LSU who moved from her role as a chemistry professor into the equivalent of their Center for Teaching and Learning. I forget what they called it. And her experience led to her writing this book. She's very famous for taking students who were struggling in things like chemistry and actually getting them to where they were scoring A's on all of their exams and moving through the curriculum quite well. And she came up with these 10 metacognitive strategies that you all need to use to be effective learners or studying, however you want to think about it. The first thing that you need to do before you ever go to a class is you need to preview the material. Why is that important?
Prepare your mind.
Pardon?
Prepare your mind.
Yeah, you prepare your mind. If you've ever done any kind of painting, what do you do to the wall or the car before you put the real paint on it? You prep it, you prime it, right? You sand it, you do all. That's what previewing does. It prepares your mind to go into that classroom and receive the information that's going to be talked about. If you go in cold, there is nothing for that information to stick to. It'll be difficult. So previewing is very, very important. You need to prepare for active reading. Is there passive reading? You bet there is. I don't know how you all read. I have 2 types of reading. I have passive reading that I use to try to put myself to sleep for my insomnia reasons. I don't care if I remember a thing. I'm just reading to get tired and fall asleep. That's what I do on my iPad as I'm laying in bed and I'm having a bout of insomnia. I'll find something and I'll start reading. I might remember a few bits, but the point isn't to remember anything. I'm reading something and then I fall asleep. The iPad hits me in the face and I go to sleep, right? That's not active reading. Active reading is reading for learning's sake, right? And you've got to prepare for that, okay? Paraphrasing things is a metacognitive strategy. What do we mean by paraphrasing?
Being able to shorten it into your own words.
That's right. Can you take something and put it into your own words in a way that somebody can understand it? That's very important, right? Active reading, which we just talked about. Using the textbook correctly. Okay? What does that mean? How do you use a textbook? It's going to be different classes. It's going to be different in English class than in chemistry class. Let's focus on chemistry. How do you all use your textbooks? How many of you use your textbooks? Let me start with that question. Right? A couple of you. You pay good money, less so now that we have the program, but the first day program, but you all pay good money for that textbook. Did you know that 99% of your professors come into class prepared to lecture thinking you have read your textbook and skip over things that they think are self-explanatory? Again, if you haven't used that textbook correctly, you haven't previewed, you haven't prepared your mind. I always recommend to students to before you go into class, before you even begin to read that chapter for your chemistry, skim the entire chapter, prepare your mind for what those topics are going to be in that chapter. Then go back and start actively reading. You would need to at least have skimmed the material before you go to a class on that topic. Okay? There's problems in your textbook. How many of you actually work the example problems after you finish reading a section? A few of you. It needs to be every one of you. You've got to work those examples. If you read section 5.2 and there's an example problem at the end that they provide a solution for, don't look at the solution because it will make sense to you when you look at the solution, but that's somebody else's work. Try to solve it yourself, then look at the solution. If you can't answer the question, what do you need to do? You need to go back and reread and figure out where your issues are. That also gives you things to go ask your instructor about. One of the things that's so frustrating for faculty is when students make appointments to come to office hours, and the student walks in and says, I don't understand anything. Well, what do you mean you don't understand anything? I just don't understand anything. That's so frustrating. Well, what are you struggling with? What problems have you tried? Well, I haven't tried any of the problems yet. But I just don't understand what you're saying. In an office hour, we don't have time to go back and teach you everything again, right? That's just not going to be possible. So, but if you go into that office hour and you say, you know, I read section 5.2, I tried to work this problem, and I'm getting the first 3 steps right, and I cannot figure out for the life of me how they're getting the final answer. That's something that you and the instructor can work on and help you understand what it is that you're missing or whatever the case may be, right? That's how you need to use your textbook. Okay? You need to attend class and take notes typically by hand. Now, you can do this on a tablet, but typing, for some reason, and I don't understand it, does not make connections in the brain the same way as doing this does. There's something about having to do this versus this that makes people retain information better. Okay? Do your homework without using the examples and do them when they're assigned. Very important. Teach the material. Dr. McGuire tells us a story in the seminar that I heard her talk at, where she had a student who told her that all he did was teach the material to his plant, and it helped. And I think that's a little too far-fetched. But teach the material to somebody. You got roommates, you got friends, you got family. You know what? If you can make your grandma understand it, or your grandpa, you probably understand the material, right? If you can break it down into simple things. Working in groups, as we just talked about, study groups are very, very important. And create your own exam. My goodness, what does that mean? As you're reading, think about what might an exam question be over that material. If you can write a good exam question over a material, you probably understand that material. You know, and good exam questions for chemistry aren't what is the definition of. Right? We're talking about application. Okay? And then I had an 11th one, personal reflection of performance. A very important step. Okay? So always think about how your things are doing. So let's talk about this. She calls it the study cycle. I call it the learning cycle. Again, you want to preview before you come to class. You want to make sure that you attend class. That's a no-brainer, right? But at the time that I put this together, with what the tuition rates were at the time, you all pay about 50 cents a minute to be in a class. So for an hour class, you all are paying $30. You or somebody who's paying your tuition for you is paying about 50 cents a minute. I don't know too many people, period, especially at your age, that have jobs that they make 50 cents a minute at, that they make $30 an hour. Some of you might, but it's rare, right? So why would you not come to class when you're paying that kind of money for it? Make sure you review after the class, okay? This class, not so much of an issue, right? But your Gen Chem, your organic, you need to, as soon as you can, go back and review those notes. Okay, so you previewed, you primed, you went to class, you have some information. The review is there to make sure that the coding is nice and smooth and it looks right, right? So you want to do that as quickly as possible. Make sure you're in learning mode, right? We don't think of it as studying anymore. You want to assess by working problems, and that's going to be a cycle, right? That's going to be a cycle in this algorithm. Problems I got right, I know those. Problems that I didn't get right, I need to go back and review a little bit more, study, learn, move forward. Okay? So we're going to call this, we're going to change her terminology to the learning cycle here. All right. So I'm going to stop here for today. We will pick up with the Feynman technique on our next week. Okay? And then have some other things as well, but we'll pick up on the Feynman technique. I think it's a very interesting technique on learning that Dr. Feynman, who won a Nobel Prize, used to learn things. And please, you should have 2 sheets to turn into me today on that learning inventory. Make sure your name's on the first sheet. Your name is not on the second sheet. Turn them both in. And we will talk about that next week as well. So that's going to be your attendance for today. I will have your notebook reflection up probably by the end of the day, I think. Should be able to get that up for you. And I will see you all next week.
You want us to write it on the?
Write your name on the.
Write your name on that sheet, not on that sheet.
I'm gonna just put it right here.
That's fine.
And you want the original?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just get it to me by 5.
Yes, mine's are in front and back.
That's fine. It just won't be anonymous. Won't be anonymous.